Cosmic here, welcome back to the channel, and today we got some amazing dev notes that I just had to do a video on to give my thoughts, because while I think there's some massive community wins here that we've been complaining about, and I've been super vocal in particular about the unit costs, which did get fixed in this upcoming update from the devs, there is one that I'm not a big fan of, so I want to at least talk through all the positive stuff and then give my thoughts on where I think that there might be a little bit of a miss in these notes. So with that out of the way, let's just dive right into things. And yes, as the thumbnail and as a lot of people are going to be really excited about, is the currency update, and in particular, the level 60 cost that we're seeing in terms of how much of a reduction. So an 80% reduction in cost here is just absolutely great. They acknowledge that it is simply too expensive to upgrade. And while for a lot of people, you will get a much better investment into the power level for your units if you maybe instead of going to 60, go into a memory fragment set and maxing it out and finding good stats, this is still a very welcomed addition. And they go one step further to say that there will actually be a refund for a lot of players if you've already invested this cost. So for me in particular, who has been farming and wasting a lot of stamina and even max refreshes on the units and getting that currency back, this is great. I should no longer feel that I need to go into the unit farming mine, which always just felt like the worst one to do. You know, 96,000 for 60 stamina was just not it. So I am very happy to see this update. And I've seen a lot of comments already about like, oh my God, this fixes everything. You know, we won't have to worry about units ever again. And well, the one thing I do want to add here is keep in mind, I covered this in a previous video that it still cost a ton to upgrade your gear or memory fragments in this case to get them to +5. Now, keep in mind, you shouldn't be upgrading just every single piece you find to +5. So, you know, we'll have to see where this comes out in the wash in the long term, but there are still some unit sinks in the game that you will still feel the brunt of. Now, the nice thing about memory fragments in particular is that if you get a really nice, the plus 12% attack pieces or the critical damage pieces that you are going to freely rotate between your characters, you know, finding a good piece once, you're done. And you can set that piece for like 3, 4, 5 different characters. You just have to continuously rotate it. Or if you have like 2 damage dealers that you really want to get the piece for, then you farm, you know, twice as much, but then it's done. You can freely use those pieces on various teams. And especially if I want like Mei Lin one day, or if I want to swap to Yuki, I have that flexibility. So I think this is still a very nice update, and a very welcomed one for sure, because it will make getting to 60 easier. Now, of course, this does come off the back of, well, okay, units is only one problem, right? We need to get better currency beyond units, like the upgrade materials, potential nodes. We need to get our combatants up to feel stronger to go through the content. And thankfully, that's what they also added, that they're going to add the Black Horn trade, which you get through Chaos. And this was a really nice, you know, note from the devs as well, as they could have made this where it was like, oh, only if you're doing difficulty 11 in the seasonal Chaos do you get these drops, right? They could have made a very easy oversight of challenging players to do higher level content to really get these rewards. However, they do add a note here that the amount of Crystal of Discord earned is not heavily affected by difficulty level. So this is something that all Protoss and all players should be able to benefit from, which is super awesome to see. Now, again, from the information that we have today, we don't know if this is going to how much resources, I should really say, is this going to help for, right? Is this going to be enough for like 3 characters and then we have to wait X amount of months for it to refresh, recycle? You know, is this going to have the same insanely long time that the Zero system has? We'll have to wait and see. But at least for the fact that they're adding it to the game, I think is a very welcomed addition. And again, notably here is that it's also potential nodes. It's also memory fragment pieces. And this one in particular, like the blue drop for memory fragments, once you start upgrading gear, definitely feels a little bit bad. It feels very limiting. So for me personally, more weekly boss mats, huge win. Also really love to see the memory fragments kind of acknowledged here as well. For upgrading at +4 and +5 does get quite expensive. So really nice here, right? They could have just made this, you know, like striker books or the other pieces, but it does look like it is kind of well thought out enough here. And, you know, to call it out like it is, it looks like there is a slider bar here on the side. So it does look like there'll be some additional material. So I'm expecting that we'll see those other ones that I had mentioned. Now, getting into the Chaos gameplay experience, they do note that, like, hey, this is a long-term project for us. And I want to be upfront, like, I think this is absolutely going to be the hardest thing to get right. I've said this in previous videos, but, like, this is the area that I personally give the devs the most leniency around because you do want to focus on this game mode and not just rush out a update that is going to quickly break it, because at the end of the day, we spend the most amount of time in this game mode, and it's what's going to keep players coming back for more time and time again. So you have to be mindful about what type of improvements, upgrades, quality of life stuff that you're adding, because making it too easy or too hard, both ends of the spectrum, will make players bounce off of it. So, and again, I really appreciate they add, it's an ongoing long-term task for the project. Now, they do note here that they add the Reaper feature, fixes monsters' HP at 1-4-3 normal battles. This is something that's in the game already as one of the options for just having it for 2 stages instead of 3. So I think that will help at least a little bit for the normal battles and, you know, shorten the amount of nodes, especially when we see the nodes are getting up to like the mid-20s to 30s. You know, effectively a 10% reduction is nice and at least a step in the right direction. Now, the one that I think most people will be really happy about, because it has been a complete pain point for all of us, especially during the stream, where it's just like, man, how many points is this deck currently worth? So while you will still have to remember in terms of like how much is a second copy worth, how much is that third removal worth, there at least is the ability to very quickly go into your tab. So if you click on the portraits in the top left, that's how you get to this menu, and you'll now see a little update saying, hey, here's how many points you have access to in this mode. And when you get that upgrade or when you get that duplicate, it will update in real time for you, which is very nice. Now, the one that I, definitely took a point here is reducing skill animation time. Look, I love the animations. I love that there is a lot of, flair and grace that goes into the game for at least the animations and the sound effects and all that good stuff. But when you go in for the really long grinds and you're trying to just find that one epiphany, and you've been going in for the chaos for like 8 hours in a day and basically making it a job, it feels like sometimes, I want to skip animations button or making it just shorter in general, because that eats up a lot of time, and it might not seem like it because we're just talking about a few seconds every time the animation plays, but over the course of a chaos run or two, that's now getting into minutes. And then when we think about the overall season, we are now talking about hours lost to the animation. So I will be very interested to see how they improve this. But they do say our goal is to shorten skill animation time to a level that players can clearly feel and appreciate. So something to note here is that they do slip in a couple areas that some of these updates will either be for the December 3rd update, which is the second major update within this story, the new banner, the new raid boss, what have you, where some of it will be a little bit later. So I'll do my best to call that out as we're going through it, but do keep that in mind. We then get into quality of life improvements, where the current turn count in the Basin of Hyperspace and other areas is really nice because, again, turn count does matter. So nice to see just a little icon being updated there. And then also just the freely moving characters around in the different teams can be a little bit of annoying. And I'm going to take this one step further, is that we need more presets. That's really what this boils down to for me personally, is that having the, 8 presets, I think it is, in the game currently is not enough. So I do hope that they will expand on that in the future, because there does need to be an idea here of like, hey, we want more characters in the future, which means we're going to need more presets just naturally. And well, there's already not enough. So this is a problem that just kind of continues to scale up over time. Now, getting into buffs and the other areas of improvements. Now, this one does get a little bit of a, we'll see how it goes. So I'm going to be very careful in what I say and read here. So during chaos, when entering a mental breakdown state, screen effects will now be more intense, and unidentified area text will include additional horror effects. Special effects for breakdown cards have also been improved. Now, this is really nice. They talk about strengthening the presentation so you can further immerse yourself in the darker atmosphere of the game. This is something that they talked about previously, and it is really nice to see the devs are actually delivering on it. Now, how much that this will actually improve in the game, we'll have to wait and see. But I think for a lot of people, when we reflect on what the Nightmare mode adds in terms of like the death animations, that is more of like the darker, grimmer details that we hope to see kind of reflected in the rest of Chaos Zero Nightmare. Not just the gameplay, but the story update that we're getting and other areas. So I really hope that this is one that they continue to refine and work on because I think it is very important to the identity of Chaos Zero Nightmare in terms of it's not just obviously like the waifu draw and the characters obviously have to have an appeal to them, but I do think there is value in making sure that the world itself is presented in a better way. And better in this context just means more true to what the devs initially envisioned, which is a darker style of game. Now, the one that I know is going to cause a lot of people some grief, there's a lot of text here, but it basically says, get good in so many words. And myself and other creators have definitely commented on this, that Yuki as a character, and look, I was wrong up front as well. I have no problem admitting that because my day zero impression of Yuki was you want these epiphanies and it ended up being something completely different, right? Yuki is a character that not only do you have to have the right combatants for, you have to pick the right epiphanies. And if you mess up either one of those, she's going to feel bad. Which means, unfortunately, unless you follow someone who's already spent like 40 hours min-maxing this and tells you exactly how to build her, she's going to feel terrible. Now, two things to note here that I think are doing a good job of addressing it is that they do say, hey, look, our internal data says that when she is in AoE fights or multi-enemy fights, which again, what is she is designed for, she does do a good enough job. And if we were to buff it anymore, then it would push out other characters. So we do have to keep in mind, we need her to be focused on the areas that she's meant to excel at and not just have a character that completely power creeps every other character in the game, because that's not good for anyone. Now, I do want to then immediately follow that up and stress with this next point, is that this is also a good and bad, right? I appreciate that the devs, as I have been very vocal about this, have stated, like, look, she has some epiphanies that just aren't getting picked. And spoiler, because they're not good. They are very, very bad. And again, hurt your build and quality of the character by picking some of these epiphanies. And I did complete a single target build on stream. And, you know, while it's not as good as Haru, which again, what we'd expect to see, because Haru does not have like a good AoE build by comparison. So Yuki shouldn't be able to do both single target and AoE base damage. The devs do note here that it won't be available immediately, but in a future build, they are looking at, you know, improving some aspects of the single target build. Now, for this one, I really think you just need to look at Flash Slash and how it gets its damage and how you build it out around that. So I do look forward to seeing how they're going to balance this, but then I also immediately worry, like, I have been able to build a Yuki that single target that does more damage than Haru's anchor shots. Now, again, the trade-off here is that Haru is able to loop multiple anchor shots in a turn with the right build. So maybe that's the trade-off that they're going for, right? Like, and just to throw numbers at it, right? Like, Haru and Yuki can both do 5,000 damage instances with single target. Now, Yuki, unfortunately, can only do that once, where Haru can do that 2 or 3 times in a turn. Maybe that's good enough. Maybe they're talking about damage over the full turn and not just simply a how much damage they're dealing in one instance. So if that's how they balance it, great. But something I am going to be watching very carefully to see what they do with it. And then again, they do mention that they're going to say, hey, we're going to continue to work on content environments where pickup characters can fully showcase their abilities. I do appreciate this because as we have all have set up to this point, the codex and the areas, you know, for the seasonal chaos really felt lacking. Like, unless you went into Swamp of Judgment in particular, Yuki felt really bad. And that's not just because of her kit. That's also just because of how elemental advantages work in this game. So I will, you know, wait for that update in terms of how Chizuru is going to land, because I think she's just going to come out swinging. Now, before I get into the tunnel update, the last thing is spectral cubes. For when you have more ego manifestation for a certain character, you'll get additional like rebates, refunds, you know, whatever mileage currency you want to call it as, that will get you some extra stuff. This is a future update. We'll have to wait and see. But now the one thing I do want to kind of complain about is that we're going to look at the dimensional tunnels are going to appear in the Codex gameplay. So On one hand, this is really great. It is no longer going to restrict players in terms of where they can go farm that content, because if you don't have like Avoid Elemental Advantage, maybe you want to go do Swamp of Judgment, as I kind of just mentioned, and you want to go there to farm your seasonal updates, because if you get a forbidden card, now the save data will be updated to say, hey, that does count towards the seasonal save, meaning you can go do whatever content you want in the game to get save data. I want to be very clear. I think giving players the flexibility for that is extremely important and does fix a lot of the issues that people had for being able to farm save data. Now, the immediate follow-up that I want to give here then is kind of what's the point, right? What is the point of a season if it doesn't feel like a season anymore? Now, part of that does get answered by the weekly bosses and the raid boss. I'm going to continue to just call it the raid boss because now I forget the actual name of it, but the big boss that needs 2 teams, right, for a point challenge. Now, those can be fine. That can still be a large focus, but by moving this to the overall Codex and Zero system, what have you, it now feels like we're kind of getting too many steps away from what makes a seasonal update great. You know, we're still going to get story updates. We're still going to get the major boss updates. That's great. But I hope that they recognize that this is more of like a quality of life thing that does unfortunately have a little bit of a drawback of taking away the feel of going into the seasonal content updates and what that really means to farm that. So again, on one hand, I'm really happy. I can take Yuki into Swamp of Judgment and get her much better save data now. But I really hope they will instead consider future updates to have even more seasonal content where it's not just a chaos mode that we're locked into, right? We need either other game updates or features, which they do mention in this, to make it feel special, to really make the seasonal side of it shine, because I worry that we're going to get into a pitfall of like, hey, I am someone who loves Yuki, and Yuki is my main character I'm going to use, so no matter what, for the next year of the game, I'm only going to be able to do Swamp of Judgment. I feel like that would just unfortunately be a little bit of a mess. So I think this one, again, is good in the short term, but I do have very significant worries on the long term, because this does mean that the devs need to cook up something else and give us a true seasonal content that players are excited to participate in, but then also not feel like they're limited based on if they pulled the most recent rate up banner character or not. So overall, I am really excited by this update. I think there's a lot of good news here. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Are you getting excited now for the next major update in 2 weeks because there's just a wild range of quality of life improvements? Or are there other areas that you felt like they just still missed out on and are hoping for maybe 1 or 2 different updates? Again, let me know in the comments down below. And that's going to do it for this video. So until next time, my friends, stay safe, stay hydrated, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.